All right, good afternoon, friends and neighbors. What we are going to work through today is a packet tracer voice over IP lab. And so the thing that I want to express at the beginning here is that there's two really important things to remember. So you got your config, okay, but the thing that you want to make sure of is that your routing and your VLANs work, and because nothing works without that. And then the other key to voice over IP is that you've got to get the MAC addresses for your phones. If you don't have the MAC addresses, you can't do the configuration. And so in packet tracers, sometimes they're a little difficult or challenging to find, not because we don't see them in the devices, but because sometimes the devices don't communicate their MAC address. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and set up our basic topology. So I always use 2811s. We use those in the lab too. And so I'm going to bring up a switch and a router here. And then for testing purposes, I always add a couple of PCs just to make sure that my VLANs work fine. And that'll also tell me if my scopes are working once I start getting my DHCP configured. Okay, so first up, we'll go ahead and connect our router. And it looks weird, but I'm going to go ahead and connect it twice to the, and maybe what I'll do is, I'm going to delete these and we'll put them maybe in a place that's a little more obvious what we're doing. Okay, so first we'll do our VLANs like this, and maybe I'll put the first 12 ports in one VLAN and the next 12 in the other one. Okay, and then we'll connect this PC over here, and we'll put that collectively together with one of the router interfaces. And then let me see, I did 13 and 14. Okay, so let's first work on the router. And this part is really straightforward, right? We're just going to do the interfaces and then we'll get our basic routing, and then we'll do our VLANs. So let's go to int f0/0. Whoops, config t works first. And f0/0. And oh, I don't know. Let's do. We'll make life easy, I guess. We'll do 2 networks on the 169 or 192.168 address. So we'll do IP address 192.168. We'll do the 100, and we use those for our VLANs too. That'll work. Okay, and we'll do no shut, and you can do this first to show you which interface you're fooling around with. Okay, and then maybe I'll go to int f0/1. And let's see if I do no shut, it tells me which one I'm talking to. And then maybe we'll do the 200. Okay, so put a couple of notes here. So this is 192.168.100.0 whoa, let's do that right. .0/24. And over here, we've got 192.168.200.0/24. Okay, and for right now, we'll go ahead and do our IP addresses for our hosts. And this will be 192.168. Whoops. 100. We'll make that, oh, for heaven's sakes. There we go. And then maybe we'll go to our gateway. 254. And that should do it for that one. And over here we have, of course, the node on the 200 network. Its default gateway will be almost the same as the other one, but 200. Okay. Now, if we take a look at our routing table, right, we should see two directly connected networks, the 100 and the 200. So that seems pretty straightforward. And the routing should not be difficult. So I should be able to ping the node on the other network. Now remember that we're waiting for ARP tables to be updated here, so we'll give this a second. The first one times out a lot, and then off we go. All right, so we know that the routing works right now. And so if we just sit back and go, I know that my routing works. Well, let's take care of the VLANs on the switch next. All right, and so we'll go to the CLI, and what I'm going to do is interface range. And you know, I forgot. I'll actually show you. A good way, if you're dealing with a switch and you're not sure what the interfaces are actually called, if you do a show int or a show VLAN, you can see what the switch thinks they are. Now, in this case, this switch thinks that they're fast Ethernet interfaces, but if I had picked another switch, a 3560 or something like that, they would be gig interfaces. And sometimes there's actually, another number here that indicates, so these are blades and switch ports, and then sometimes the group that the switch might be in. So it's good to make sure that you know what your interfaces are. So these are just simple fast Ethernet interfaces. So interface range. And I think I said I was going to do 1 to 12. So I'll say switch port access VLAN 100. Okay. And we'll check this here in a second. And we'll do 13 to 24. And like that. So what did I just do? Well, if I do show VLAN again now, I can see that where before, maybe we'll go back and show you that. All right, so where before everybody was in VLAN 1, now we've got 12 ports in VLAN 200 and 12 ports in VLAN 100. And the only ports left in VLAN 1 are my gig ports here. And those are the uplinks. We're not going to worry about those. Okay, well, I gave these PCs, I gave them static IP addresses, but that's not where we're sort of going here. So I'm going to go back to the router, and now I'm going to configure my DHCP scopes. So, so this is your first step to voice over IP configuration, right? When your phones, hey, like this one here, want to get configured, what we have to do is we have a couple of steps that they go through. The first is DHCP. The second is that they want a TFTP server. And then the third is that they're going to register with the call server. And I think what I'll do also is we'll move all of this stuff over just a little bit so that we can see a little bit more about what's going on. Okay. And so I'm going to now do an IP DHCP pool, and we'll call these this one computers. Okay. And so in a DHCP scope, at a minimum, you need to give out IP addresses and then a mask. But the other thing that we like to give out also sort of basics is that we're going to give out a default gateway. So we'll do those first. So I'm going to specify the network that I'm going to give out. And that, of course, is on one side, I'll make the 100 net for my PCs. So 100.0, 255, 255, 255, 255. Now, what this means is that the router is going to want to give out all 256 of those possible addresses, or maybe more realistically, 1 to 254. So we'll have to fix that here in a second. But the next thing that we want is, oh, by the way, we can see that we have a couple of options here. I'm not going to worry about name servers or anything else. It's not really part of this lab. And if you're doing a basic configuration just to understand things, DNS has a tie with SIP. but we're not going to worry about it right now because we're going to be dialing by number and things like that anyway. But we will do a default router. And for this particular subnet, it makes sense, of course, to put the router on the same subnet as the network. Okay, that'll about do it for the PCs. That's really all that they need. That's all we care about right now. But let's do, while we're here, we might as well do the voice over IP scope, and we're going to add one thing to that. So we're going to call this one VoIP, and the network for this one, well, we'll do this as long as it popped up, is the 200 network. Now, for voice over IP, we do need to give the address of a TFTP server. Now, in a lot of voice over IP systems, we give it the name of a TFTP server, but you also might give it the name of a call server. Now, Cisco is a little bit different, at least in Call Manager Express. As soon as the PC learns where the TFTP server is, it also picks up the configuration from the TFTP server, and so it learns where the call server is. It doesn't hurt that the call server is the TFTP server as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is tell the phones where they can get their TFTP server. I'm going to do that with an option, and we can see that there's lots and lots of options available. Option 150 is the one that we want for a Cisco configuration. I've also used option 66, and this really is the difference, just a lot of times the difference between vendors. So if we look at question mark as our friend, it's a little odd. Normally you would expect just an IP address, but it says, all right, what's the IP address of this particular TFTP server? It's 192.168, of course, 200.254. And the reason that I'm going to specify 200 is not only because I'm in this particular scope, it doesn't really matter because it's just an IP address as long as I can get to it, but I'm also going to use this as the interface for my telephony server or my call server. Okay, so a quick review of the config thus far. I've created 2 pools or scopes, and then I've got my interface configuration. That's pretty much it. I haven't solved the problem that my DHCP server might give out the addresses that I don't want it to. So I'm now going to do IP DHCP, but I'm going to add some excluded addresses. These are addresses that I don't want my server to give out. And so these would include my router interfaces. Okay, which makes sense. And then if I had anything else, that was in the network that had a static IP address, I would add them to the exclusion list. All right, so that finishes sort of our basic routing and VLAN configuration for the infrastructure. Let's test our DHCP servers, and we'll make sure that it's working okay. So I'm going to switch this to DHCP now. Okay, and it looks like it picked up an address. It picked up the first one in the range. And so I'll do the same thing here, and this should pick up the first one in that range. There we go. All right, so both my pools appear to be working just fine. All right, well, let's go ahead and start on the phone configuration. Now, we're cheating a little bit because we're using a simulation. In an actual case where you are doing real life phones, then what you might find out is that your phones actually need a couple of upgrade files. So these would be files in the directory of your TFTP server. You can see there's not much here, but we might need files that are .spn files like that, or .loads files. And these are phones or files specific for the phones. But we have a nice simulation here, so we're not going to have to worry about that. But that's why I recommend you doing a directory listing to make sure that if you're doing this in real life, you have all the necessary files. Okay. Well, there's 2 parts to the configuration. One is the telephony service global, and then the configuration for the ePhones themselves. So let's first add a phone here. Now under the in Packet Tracer, what we see is we've got these handy phones here. So I'm going to pick up one of these, and I'm going to go ahead and connect it to. Oh, before I do that, all right. So I'm going to connect it to the phone VLAN. But take a look at this. A phone is actually, well, certain models of phones are actually they're actually 3-port switches internally. And so what we're going to do is connect the switch port to the proper VLAN. So we're going to do this here. Okay. Now, what the phone is trying to do is trying to come up and learn its IP address right quick. But you can see that this takes a little while. And that's because by default, switch ports come up blocking. That's a spanning tree thing. So what we are going to do is in the voice VLAN, well, I should be careful about how I say that. In the VLAN allocated for the voice phones, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off that, that delay. So we'll see that if I do interface range, I have 0/13 to 24, okay, and I'm going to do spanning tree port fast. Now we can see that that this port still has not come up yet. And that's because spanning tree is doing a delay for each state that it goes through. It's doing a listening and then a learning delay before it goes forwarding. So I'm going to turn that off. And you can see it's giving me a big warning, right? It says, wait a minute, you have told me that you want to do port fast. So this is all the same message about the same port. But if we take a look at one message, only have effect if the interface is in non-trunking mode, meaning that it's not talking to another switch usually. And be careful that you only do this with a single host. Now we'll see if we can break the rules a little bit, but all that this really does is turn off the spanning tree discovery. So let's delete this. Cancel that. We'll just delete this one here. Just delete this right here. And we'll see the impact now of this connecting to the switch. And we can actually, well, we won't, no, we're not going to pay attention here. All right, so the port is coming up already. And we'll check our config here. Normally, so simulation fun, right? This would normally be up already. 3 hello times is what the limit is, but that's what you want to do to make sure that the port goes forwarding before your DHCP request times out. All right, so while the, oops, that's not what I want to do. While we're waiting for the simulation to figure itself out, I'm going to go ahead and start my VoIP configuration. So the VoIP configuration here is really about, as I said, 2 parts. One is the global telephony service, and the other one is the ePhones themselves. So let's do the telephony. So whoops, wrong screen. There we go. Let's do the telephony service itself first. And you can see that it's exactly what it sounds like, telephony service. And there's really no arguments to this. It's just changing what you're working on. So now what I'm going to do is we've got a couple of options here. What we're really worried about, because we're not doing anything with another call server or anything of that sort, what we really want to worry about is these right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say that our max, whoops, spelling counts, max dial numbers, and it's just a number that it's looking for. So I'll just say 5. And then we can see that we've got a max ePhones here. We'll also say 5. And that's because you create an ePhone, but then you also have to create a dial number to go along with your ePhone. Now there are a couple of other options that you can do here, but I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so let's exit out of this one. And we've got, if we just do, we take a look here, these are the two commands that I'm worried about next. And really what we're doing with these two commands is we're tying an ePhone instance with a dial number that goes along with that ePhone, and then also a MAC address. So that's really the whole name of the game here. Now, if we take a look at a phone, right, you're used to being able to look through the, oh, I see. So I see what's going on here. You know what I did? I forgot to use a switch with power over Ethernet. So let me see, do I feel like fixing that? I'm actually not going to worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and plug in this, but that's why the port wouldn't come up. The switch, the phone was not powered on. But you can see that there's not a whole lot to the configuration on this particular switch. It's not giving me the MAC address. Now, if I look at the switch, right, and I say, if I say, well, I am going to do a show MAC address table, I might be able to pick it up this way. And it looks like this right here might be, but I've got, wait a minute, I've got a PC there and a router there. So, and they're both in these different ports here. So what port was this one again? Oops. Uh-oh, no, I did it. Okay. So this guy might be the one that I want. So I'm going to take a second and write that down. So if we believe that to be the MAC address, okay, whoops. So what I'm going to do is, that was connected to port 15, I think. So I'm going to copy this, and we'll put a note right here. See if it'll do that. There we go. All right. So hopefully that's our MAC address for our phone. So now what we're going to do is come up here, and we're going to say, let's do the first one. We'll do ePhone. And now the question mark is, we got these two things. So let's do a space. And whoops, let's do, this will be our first ePhone. Okay. So we can see that the prompt changed again. And what do we have available to us? Well, we've got a MAC address. And for us, it's going to figure out the phone type all by itself. But we'll do a MAC address here. So we want to tie ePhone 1 with this particular MAC address. So 0001 63C1. And as long as I got my ports right when I was going, I'm going kind of fast here, but 5D01. Okay. I'm also going to do, now the button command tells me the phone number that I want to attach to a particular button. So I'm going to come back to this here in a second after I've configured my ePhone dial number. Okay, ePhone dial number. Now, what does it want here? It wants the number of the phone that goes along with this dial number. So I'm going to do this. Okay, there we go. And so we are aware that we want to configure an ePhone. So we're trying to bring up a virtual channel that goes along with this ePhone. Well, what's available here for my ePhone? Well, pretty much a number. By the way, E.164 is the numbering plan that we use for all phone numbers. I'm going to go ahead and use a set of a phone number that goes along with, you know, our standard 7 digits. So we'll do, whoops, I suppose I had to tell it that I want to do a number. And our exchange here is, oh, I don't know, let's do 8888 like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go back, and now that we've got a dial number, I'm going to say ePhone 1, and I'm going to say button. And if we look at this command, it is a number of a button index and then the dial number index. So the button number 1 is what I want, and 1. Now this would actually show up on a real phone. It would actually show up. Well, hey, I'll show you. Let's see if I can show the interface here. These guys along here, that's where the buttons are, and that's the mapping right there. Now, whether or not it works in the simulation, I don't think so, but we'll do it just by way of being complete. Okay, and that's it. So now what we're going to do is we'll take a look at our phone, and if I was going to use this phone, okay, we're actually going to use the GUI. And it looks like we're running into a problem here. I might actually have to switch out my switch, which won't be a big deal. But the way that you use this is you just kind of click right here, and if it's powered up and everything, then you can start dialing numbers. And since this is giving me a bit of a problem, I'm going to go ahead and use the a power over Ethernet equipped switch, and that happens to be the 3560 down here. Okay, so I'm going to quickly do the same configuration. Oops. All right. Well, we'll bring in another phone. We'll get that ready here in a second. We done booting? We are done booting. No, so this won't take me just but a second here. Now, what are the ports called on this guy? Still the same, so life is good. That's 0/1 to 12. Switch port access VLAN 100. Sorry about the delay. I completely forgot, I must admit, about the power over Ethernet. And we'll do spanning tree port fast here. Okay, so we should be okay. So now let's delete. No, we want to delete this one. And it's going to be a little weird, but we'll have to stick this guy back on the topology. And we'll just do all of our connections here again. There we go. Port 13 goes to here. This poor little PC is out in the cold here. And then we'll leave this guy in the wrong VLAN for right now. Just because. Now we are going to put the two phones in the, now this PC, we'll see what that's for here in a second. I can't remember where this should be. I think this was the one that I had in there before. There we go. Now the switch, we'll see if we've picked up another MAC address in the MAC address table 16. So this one should be this guy here. There we go. Okay, so back to our, and actually I'm going to go back to this guy and I'm going to disable this. Yeah, so this is take that right off of there, and we'll see if they will come up without, see if they'll make use of power over Ethernet. Okay, so now we need ePhone 2. Okay, so again, our options here, we need a MAC address and we need a button, but we'll do the MAC address first. MAC address for this one is 000C 8509 0701. And we'll do the ePhone dial number. Whoops, ePhone dial number 2. And let's see, I wanted to do a number of 475. We'll do, I think it did 888, right? So we'll do 999 like that. And then we'll do this. phone 2. Now, the button command here, again, is looking for a button index and a dial number index. We just increased the dial number index by 1, so we're going to do the button number 1, but it's going to be phone 2. I'm also going to I'm going to go back to the telephony service because I'm going to do something now that really sort of, now that we've got a configuration that's complete, we have to tell the phones what they're actually doing. And so we're going to do a create CNF files, which is our configuration file. All right, so that's fine right there. Okay. Now, theoretically, we're done with the basic configuration. Now the phones are acting a little funny here in our configuration, so we can do a little troubleshooting. So I could do a show ePhone and just see what's going on. So clearly we've got a couple of ePhones here, but our problems are that we're not registered. So I'm going to check my MAC addresses first. Okay, so not registered. And one of the problems is that it's not picking up an IP address. And the second one also not registered. So let's take a look at the MAC address there. Hopefully I typed everything okay. But this is a good indication that even though they're not working the way that they should, and I suspect it has to do with the spanning tree port fast command, that I may have to go into the individual ports and do it. This tells me that I've got a configuration and that the system is aware that these guys are out there. Now, the other thing you can do is a show IP DHCP binding, and we can see, whoops, binding, okay? And we can see the folks that have successfully pulled an IP address. And I kept this one here in this, so this tells me that my DHCP pools are working okay still. So let's take a look here. The phones are acting kind of funny. This is weird, right? So let's actually go into the switch this time. And I'm going to do config T. I'm going to do that interface range command again. And I'm going to say no spanning tree port fast. And then I'm going to go into the individual interfaces. What am I doing? Interface F0/ what was that? 15. And we'll do spanning tree. Oops. Spanning tree port fast here. Okay. And we'll do the same thing on 16. I think is where the other one is. Like that. Okay, there we go. So for some reason, this one's decided to come up. And this guy here, I suspect that it's having trouble because I changed its power status, blah, blah, blah. Let's see if we can wake it up a little bit by just unplugging it and plugging it back in. So we'll see. That looks better all of a sudden. So now on our router, let's take a look at our show ePhone again. Maybe we're getting there, maybe we're not. All right, so let's take a look at our GUIs here. And what we're waiting for is the interface to be populated with the phone number that I gave this particular phone. And we can see that, you know, it's taking its good sweet time about it. But once I decide to pick up the phone, I can actually send tones back and forth. Obviously, I'm not connected directly to the phones, right? I can't speak into the headset. But what we end up doing is sending tones back and forth. So, how about you? Are you ready to go? Configuring VLAN here still. Very nice. Well, I guess what I'm going to do is show you the next stage. While it's still waiting to figure itself out a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to add, I'm going to do a little modification to our switch here because I want to fool around with one of the ports. So inconsistent port type. I see what you're doing here. You're being a bit of a pain. All right, so this phone right here is really being a little problematic, isn't it? Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go to interface F0/24. I'm going to fool around with this interface a little bit, and I'm going to say I'm going to put you back in. We're going to say access VLAN. Well, I suppose I could do. Never mind. I'm going to do it another way. So I'm going to add another PC to this. So let's do this. And I'm going to add another phone. Okay. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect the phone in front of the PC, or the PC behind the phone. So I'm going to take my PC and I'm going to say, aha, now I'm going to use that other port here. And so I'm going to connect this to a PC. And then I'm going to connect this to one of these ports in the wrong VLAN. How does that work? Okay. So we know that this is now connected to VLAN 100. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to tell this port how to manage a phone behind the PC, right? So if I do a show, what do I want to do? MAC address table. And I just connected this, all this whole thing right here. Oops. We're in PC, or we're in port 3, right? And we'll make a little note of that. This is port 3. So now what I have to do is tell the switch what to do about that. Now, if I actually take a look at the VLANs, like this here, we can see that port 3 is up here in VLAN 1, and clearly that's not where I want my phones to be. So, but it is where I want the PC to be. So let's do this. Let's go int F0/3, and we're going to say voice. What can we do with the voice command? Oops, we can't do anything with a voice VLAN. Let's see. What did I do here? There we go. Switch port, voice, VLAN, and 200. And so what I'm doing is I'm telling this particular port, you're kind of a trunk. You are going to be, you're going to handle two particular devices, but the only two VLANs that I really want you to pay attention to is the VLAN that I assigned you to, 100, and then a voice VLAN. Okay. Now the phones really like this particular configuration, and what I will also do as long as I'm here is I'll say switch port, or whoops, that's not what I want to do. As long as I've got a phone here, I always want to sort of get that port up and running as quickly as possible. So this is probably what this thing is throwing a shoe over, although normally you would not want to worry about connecting a phone to that. Okay, so I do need, so you see that this looks like it's okay. This one looks like it's okay, but the simulation is giving me a bit of a problem right now. So let's get our MAC address for this phone. And that was port 3. So maybe that's this one back here, but I'm a little nervous about it. So what I'm actually going to do is, well, let's check this machine first. Are you getting the right, oops, are you getting the right address? So this one picked up a 100.2. There's only one other node in the 100 network. And so this one and this one clearly picked up the correct IP addresses. Let's see what our router has to say about the ePhones that might be out there. Boy, you are still not giving me any help here. And we'll do show IP CP binding. So we have 1, 2, 3 machines in the 200 and 1, 2, 3 in the 100. And it looks like our phones are just not cooperating very well. And so now another way we can go about this, and this is actually what I ran into in the simulation earlier. If I want to take a look at the simulation, I can actually see if I can pull some addresses here. Now, I don't care about a couple of things. I'm going to get rid of CDP and DTP and STP. And what I'm really looking for is skinny messages. So, or really any message from a machine. And so looks like we're picking up something here. And so I'm going to take a look at the MAC address and see if I recognize this MAC address. And so this is my new MAC address for this particular phone. And that looks, now one of the other things that I'll check here, so that is yet another way that you can find out if you've got, you know, if you got maybe the right configuration, or if you're just trying to find out the IP address. Clearly, you know, we're just not contacting our DHCP server here very well here. But so now I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't talk my router into configuring yet another ePhone. So I'm going to do ePhone 1, or no, ePhone 3 is where I am now. And our MAC address here is going to be 0060 2F5B. Hold on, it's 35 BD. And do the dial number 3. We'll make this one, well, just to make it, I suppose I could have done this earlier to make my life a little easier, but we'll do this. This is phone 3, like that. And I think I forgot to do the button, although again, it doesn't really matter. And we've increased our index a little bit here, so like that. Are you coming up? Let's take a look at your GUI. It looks a little bit better. So we got different messaging here. And let's see, what was I going to do? Just for fun, let's ping around a little bit. So that works. Control C, IP config. Oops. Picked up 2. So I forget what you are. 200, 100. Let's go ahead and move this. Well, nothing really matters. Boy, the simulation phones are just not happy right now. Well, let's check and make sure that that I did not screw up my configuration. And if I don't see anything obviously wrong, then I'm going to say, okay, we're going to blame it on the configuration here, or blame it on the simulation a little bit. And then we'll call it a day because the video is getting a little long. But here we are. We've got our DHCP excluded addresses. We've got the networks that we're connecting to. We have the network here, and then we have the addition. Oh, I know what I forgot. Let's do that. Let's fix that right now. I feel a little silly right now, everybody. Telephony service. One of the things that I haven't done is I haven't told the phones where in the world they're getting their actual call server from. Now, it doesn't help the DHCP problem, but IP source address is 192.168.200.254. And then we've also got to give it a port number that we're going to give it. So 2000 is going to be our, whoops. Okay, so that's where we're actually sourcing all of this information from. Boy, that was, can't believe I forgot that one. So we've, we'll do our create CNF files again. And so this is another thing that's part of a good voice over IP configuration, is that we have a time server involved, but this is just a demo, so we're not going to worry about that. Okay. All right, we have some success here. So we've got our phone number that is successfully registered. And so we can go off hook, and then I would dial a number. But let's see if we got a phone that we can call. We do not. So I suspect that these phones are used to, at least in the simulation, being given a particular voice VLAN and physical configuration. So what I'm going to do is quickly, I'm going to disconnect these phones and the PCs, and then I'm going to configure them so that they're behind each other. Okay, so we'll put these two up here. We'll put this phone here, and then we will run it. Well, let's actually do this first. We'll do our switch configuration first, and I am going to do, let's see, trying to remember trying to keep in my head which ports I connected to. So looks like one. So let's do ports 4 and 5 just to make life easy. So big T will do int f0/4. So what I'm doing is configuring the voice VLAN and telling the internal switch on the phone that you're actually talking to another switch, but it's okay because you are dealing with a couple of VLANs. So we've already assigned the ports to a particular VLAN. Now we got to tell it what the voice VLAN is. And we'll do this. We'll also do spanning tree, port fast. Thank you. And we'll do that for port 4 as well. All right. So now what we need to do is we'll go ahead and connect them. So the switch will go to, we'll do port 4. PC will go to the PC. And we will do, now in an actual configuration, there is no need to actually do the PC behind the phone. What this allows us to do is save on ports. I can manage 2 connections with 1 physical port on the switch. That's kind of the whole point. But let's see if our interfaces are populated here. Still working on the IP address. Still working on the IP address. But life is good. We'll see if the PCs picked up their IP addresses, 100.5, 100.1, that looks good. And 100.2. So everybody's on the right VLAN and the right IP network. All right. Boy, these two phones just are giving me a heck of a problem. So I am not going to worry about it much farther. We'll give them, boy, maybe another minute or two before we call it a day here, because I did want to show you how to dial a phone here. And we'll just make sure that I didn't do anything silly. You can see that in the ports concerned here, we did 3, 4, and 5. Whoops, doggone it. There we go. We did the same thing in all 3 ports, right? And then we have the phones configured. If I was going to be able to dial a phone, what I would do is simply pick up the phone. Oh, no, now I broke this one. So what you would do is pick up the phone, you dial the number actually on the keypad, it would dial, you would hear the ringing, and then you would play the tones do, re, mi over the phone. And in that way we can see the RTP and the signaling traffic go back and forth. I am going to stop this particular video right now. I'll fool around with this a little bit, and then if I can get the phones ringing, then we will do that in another video. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hey, may your VoIP packets always reach their destinations.